Data privacy, we talk about it, but it also seems to be a mystery box, a black box of sorts, because we don't really seem to know what we're talking about. Where does Sri Lanka stand in terms of data privacy? How secure are we?
We have a sort of a reference to privacy in the context of right to information in the Constitution, but we don't have a direct fundamental right to privacy. Having said that, I think, as a nation took quite a good step forward when we introduced the Personal Data Protection Act way back in 2022. The enactment was to be brought into operation in phases.
Yes.
Data Protection Authority was established.
Yeah.
That part is operational. Although the authority was brought into operation, you need qualified personnel, you need the institutional framework, you need the financial resources. So there are a lot of challenges Data Protection Authority has to overcome. Given the fact that you need qualified personnel, say for example, if I lodge a complaint tomorrow, then it needs to be inquired into. So that means you need qualified inquiring officers with knowledge of data protection law. So those challenges needs to be overcome by the members of the Data Protection Authority. I think their expectation, if I'm not mistaken, by at least the end of first quarter of next year to bring the enactment into operation, but it may get changed depending on the challenges that they face.
How can the rest of the country gear up for this? I mean, let's first talk of organizations.
Actually, since 2022, organizations have been getting ready. It's not an easy task because this is primarily inspired by GDPR, and therefore compliance with the PDPA is not going to be an easy task. The organization needs to be ready to provide all the rights to the data subject and process personal data in a completely compliant environment. So that means you need to have appropriate organizational and security measures, data protection management program, all that in place. And that's the challenge the organizations are facing. Obviously, there is a little bit of a challenge for SMB sector because they have this problem of capital. This enactment, without a doubt, especially the security measures require certain amount of capital to be infused, and those are some of the challenges that they face.
What does data privacy actually look like? We spoke about all of this and more with Shanaka Gunasekara. Stay tuned.
When you have an ambition, trust your instincts. Move forward. This is your moment to shape your future, to be independent, to strengthen yourself. Your time is now. Accelerate your progress. Empowering your progress for a fulfilled life. Union Assurance.
For 30 years, LMD has been the voice of business in Sri Lanka, capturing the pulse of the nation's corporate landscape through its iconic covers. Each cover tells a story, from the first edition in 1994 to the present day, narrating key moments, leaders and trends that have shaped Sri Lanka's business ecosystem. Over the years, LMD covers have featured thought leaders, business pioneers and game-changing innovations, reflecting the evolution of industries and the economy. As we celebrate 30 years, these covers represent more than just publications. They are a testament to LMD's legacy of excellence in business journalism and its unwavering commitment to being Sri Lanka's leading voice of business. LMD, Sri Lanka's voice of business, a legacy of 30 years.
Hello and welcome to LMDtv. The topic of conversation today is data privacy, and I'm here with Shanaka Gunasekara, partner at FJ&G Saram. Welcome to our show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Data privacy, we talk about it, but it also seems to be a mystery box, a black box of sorts, because we don't really seem to know what we're talking about. So to start off the conversation, give our audience a kind of overview. Where does Sri Lanka stand in terms of data privacy? How secure are we?
Well, we have a sort of a reference to privacy in the context of right to information in the Constitution, but we don't have a direct fundamental right to privacy, unlike European countries. They have in the fundamental rights charter itself right to privacy. But having said that, we, I think, as a nation, took a quite a good step forward when we introduced the Personal Data Protection Act way back in 2022. And then I think the enactment was to be brought into operation in phases.
Yes.
And Data Protection Authority was established.
Yeah.
That part is operational. But of course, although the authority was brought into operation, you need qualified personnel, you need the institutional framework, you need the financial resources. So there are a lot of challenges the Data Protection Authority has to overcome. And they came up with set of draft rules also, which is also a positive thing. And but of course, they also need to be finalized. Given the fact that you need qualified personnel, say for example, if I lodge a complaint tomorrow, then it needs to be inquired into. So that means you need qualified inquiring officers with knowledge of data protection law. So those challenges needs to be overcome by the members of the Data Protection Authority. So that's why they need time, and that much needed time is what they are taking at the moment. I don't think they are silent. They are working round the clock to bring the enactment into operation. So there is a state of flux in terms of exact date at the moment. But I think their expectation, if I'm not mistaken, by at least the end of first quarter of next year to bring the enactment into operation. But it may get changed depending on the challenges that they face.
And while we are waiting, how can the rest of the country gear up for this? I mean, let's first talk of organizations, because things are going to change. How can they gear up for when it does come into play?
Well, actually, since 2022, organizations have been getting ready. It's not an easy task because this is primarily inspired by GDPR, and therefore compliance with the PDPA is not going to be an easy task because it requires financial as well as human resources and then a stakeholder buying in. So that that readiness has to be there. So that means when the enactment comes into operation, let's say at the end of first quarter, the organization needs to be ready to provide all the rights to the data subject and process personal data in a completely compliant environment. So that means you need to have appropriate organizational and security measures, data protection management program, all that in place. So migrating to that particular position is what they have to do at the moment. And that's the challenge the organizations are facing. Obviously, there is a little bit of a challenge for SMB sector because they have this problem of capital.
Yes.
And this enactment, without a doubt, especially the security measures, requires certain amount of capital to be infused, and those are some of the challenges that they face.
And talking about the talent aspect, what kind of challenges would you have there for organizations?
Well, that is the challenge because it's a completely new subject,
Yes.
and what we have seen so far is that there is a clear lack of knowledge across the board. Not It's not limited to the SMB sector. It's actually even applicable to the blue chip companies as well. Because needless to say that when you introduce a novel concept like this, it takes time for the market to adjust.
Yes.
So that means they have to train people. They might have to even provide them foreign training and then bring them down. So there is that learning circle. Ideally, they should start it right now because when the enactment is brought into operation, that's not going to be it's not going to be a good situation to not to have qualified people to advise you on the relevant aspects because immediately people will start exercising their rights. So there is a very clear issue in terms of talent. I think Data Protection Authority will also have to play an active role in terms of providing necessary awareness, education, perhaps even setting up institutions to provide the necessary education.
Wow, that's a lot of work
Yes.
before the act is enacted.
Correct.
Apart from organizations, when you take Sri Lanka as a whole, from the government side, are there any infrastructural developments that would make the enactment smoother?
Well, that's a huge challenge. At the moment, I think the government has undertaken the digital economy initiative.
Yes.
So there's a lot of work that is being done, having recognized the fact that up to this point, there has not been much of a, I would say, in the past, governments have not made much of attention towards developing the digital economy. So as a result of it, so this government has taken the initiative, and they have in fact set up necessary units. And I think they recently also unveiled the National Cybersecurity Operations Center.
Yeah.
So all those things, and plus I've also read that they have undertaken steps to do security audits at the government institutions. So those steps will help government institution to reach that compliance. But of course, it's a journey.
Yes.
It's because given the fact that Sri Lankan government compared to a government in a developed jurisdiction, because we have a sort of a overblown public sector, right? Whether we like it or not.
Yes.
So, and as a result of it, lots of government institutions are there processing personal data. All of them needs to be migrated to a compliant environment. So, I don't know how long it will take for the government to do that, because they are also facing financial challenges. We are fresh out of bankruptcy. So, I think it's a challenge, but they have made the correct initiative. That needs to be appreciated.
Of course.
But how long it will take, that I don't know.
Yeah, that is an unfair question to ask. Shanaka, we spoke of organizations, we spoke of the government, and now the citizens, the ones who are, I think, at the focal, the center of all of this. Are we ready, do you think? Is Sri Lanka ready? Are our citizens ready for this act to come into play? Do we understand what it actually means?
Well, initial impression, the awareness is quite low. Makes sense. But whenever you grant rights to individuals, usually individuals catch up very quickly, because it's in any society, when you impose responsibilities on individuals, it's a different scenario. But when you give rights,
Yeah.
they will immediately catch up. I think in terms of citizens, yes, awareness is required, but I don't think it will take time for them to catch up.
Okay. And talking about citizens, the priority that we should give to consent, because consent seems to be, like across all sides of data privacy. It all seems to revolve around genuine consent, not just consent you give just to get on with something. Can you give us some insights about how
Well,
it works out?
this is one of the most misunderstood concept, in the sense that, I mean, we have to go back to a little bit of origins. The prior to data protection as a concept came in, let's say specifically big tech, they used to put into their contract the string strap agreement, everything that they want to do with the data, selling of data, sharing of data. And if you want their services, you had no option but to accept it. So as a result of it, what they did is they abused the contractual consent to get everything that they want.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, there's a denial of service.
Exactly.
So then what happened is the European legislators noticed this. So the academias had to come up with a solution where while contractual consent is going to be there, they had to come up with a concept where they empower the individual. So they came up with the data protection concept, and the consent as a new concept of consent, which stand alone. And that if you are to say that I have the consent of the data subject, then they need to satisfy the elements of consent that is set out in the data protection law. So the elements of consent that they set out in the data protection law is to address that very abuse done by especially the big tech and all the other commercial entities. So what did they do? What they said is it has to be a free and genuine choice if it is consent. What it means is that I can give the consent and not suffer negative consequences.
Yes.
So if you say, I go to a bank and I say I want to open an account, they say, give me your consent to take this personal data.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can't open a bank account. That's not genuine consent because there's a negative consequence on me.
Exactly.
Mere fact that there are other banks is not relevant. So, if there is a denial of service as a rule of thumb, there can never be a genuine consent, usually. And that's the first element. Second, if there's a genuine consent, I should be able to walk away at any point of time.
Yes.
So that means I give it today, tomorrow I can decide to walk away. And then if it is a genuine consent, it should be specifically flagged to me. And then it's so that it's not hidden among the contractual terms, so that I know these are the matters for which I give consent. So it's an informed consent as well. So when you take those elements of consent and apply it to the commercial sector, application of it is very limited. That means the instances under which you can use consent as the lawful basis is very limited. Like marketing, yes, you can, because the customer has a genuine choice to say whether I want your marketing messages or not.
Yes.
All the other instances, if you are to look for a lawful basis, there are a list of lawful basis in the enactment. And if you look at all the other lawful basis except one, all the others have this one term called necessary.
Right.
So that means wherever there is an objective necessity to process personal data. Say for example, in that bank, if you go back to that bank example, the bank, for them to provide the service, perform the contract, they need to process certain personal data. They have certain legal obligations as well. So that means with regard to those instances, there's an objective necessity. That therefore, their lawful basis would be performance of the contract, legal obligation, something like network security would fall under legitimate interest. So that means those are the applicable lawful basis. If you look at any commercial organizations, if they are to look for a lawful basis to process personal data, your main lawful basis would be performance of the contract, legitimate interest, then legal obligations, so on and so forth. The consent would come in a very limited scenario. So as a rule of thumb, we would always advise try and stay away from consent, because the reason is if I use consent as the basis, customer can walk away at any point of time. But if I need that to provide the service, then I can't use the consent. So, but more often than not, we see the business leaders comes and say, okay, we have the consent to process personal data, but that's not a permitted use of consent, because the consent there is different to contractual consent. So that is why it's one of the most misunderstood concepts.
It is, and it sounds as if it's difficult to implement.
Correct. It's because the reason is that very abuse that took place has led to come up with this solution. So this is a solution for a particular mischief. So the applying that very solution yet again continuing that mischief, that's not going to work out when the enactment is brought into operation. And when the customers realizes it, when they complain, that means you will have a completely non-compliant data processing activity, because if your lawful basis is incorrect, the whole compliance process collapses at that point.
It's time now to take a very short break, but we'll soon be back to talk more about data privacy.
Display your brand message on digital screens at prime locations. The largest digital advertising network in Sri Lanka. Emerging Media.
Welcome back to the show. We're in conversation with Shanaka Gunasekara, partner at FJ&G Saram. Do you think that there are any examples of companies, even globally, that do this right, that we can?
Well, because of the fact that GDPR has been in operation for quite a period of time now, international community, at least the Western Hemisphere, they seems to, by and large, they seems to have got it right, because it has been in operation for quite a period. And in Sri Lanka also, I think that time we will it will take that time period.
Yeah.
There'll be a learning curve.
Of course.
But of course, during that learning curve, even the data protection authority will need to have a mild approach, because at the end of the day, you can't punish businesses, because if the businesses go out of
Business.
then you will have unemployment and all the other issues. I think the data protection authority is also quite sensitive to that particular issue. So they have, I think, very clearly indicated during the first 5 to 6 years, do not expect us to go and slam the businesses.
Yes.
We will work with them. We will help them so that they understand it, they comply with it, so that eventually we come to a probably in 6 to 7 years, fully data protection compliant environment.
It's a long journey ahead.
It is.
Shanaka, it's been a very interesting conversation, and the future looks promising, a little bit uncertain,
Yes.
a little bit unstable. My last question to you is, it appears that there has to be a lot of attitudinal changes as well in terms of citizens, in terms of how we do things in Sri Lanka. What insights can you share about that as a concluding kind of response?
Well, the attitude change needs to take place both from the business perspective as well as from the citizens' perspective. From the business perspective, business leaders needs to listen to the professionals and understand the fact that this is a very important thing, because let's look at it in this way. All this time data was used as a commodity, but the individuals were not given any rights. That's not an ethical thing to do. So what the data protection law has addressed is it has not brought in an alien concept. What it has tried to do is bring that much needed balance. So now the business leaders needs to respect that, listen to the professionals, and take that as a responsibility and change the organizational environment. So that attitude change from the business leaders needs to take place on one side. From the citizens side, I think when the enactment comes into operation, they also need to understand things cannot change overnight. It will take some time. You will have to consider the businesses as much needed aspect of the society to provide employment, bring foreign currency and all that.
Yes.
So therefore, they need to have a little bit of patience as well. So that attitude change has to take place. Then they also need to understand, in as much as there are rights, there are responsibilities. So before end up in slamming organizations saying they are violating my rights, there are a lot of things you can do, like provide correct information, update information on regular basis. There are those responsibilities that they can discharge. So that attitude change also needs to take place.
A lot of buy-in from all the stakeholders.
Yes.
Thank you, Shanaka.
Always.
We've been in conversation with Shanaka Gunasekara, partner at FJ&G Saram. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Loved
having
the
me.
conversation. And thank you to all our viewers for joining us. Until next time, take care.
Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram and X. Thank you for watching and stay safe.